Tonight, welcome to tonight's presentation on the Sustainability Speaker Series through the River Falls Public Library. We're thrilled to have our speaker, Dr. Terry Root, come in. It's all right, I had a little echo there, so I'm going to start over. My name is Mike Noreen. I am one of the organizers of the Sustainability Speakers Series with the River Falls Public Library. And we're thrilled to have Dr. Terry Root joining us tonight, coming back to present to us on climate change and what we all can do to help. But before we get too far into tonight's presentation, I would like to present to you some of our sponsors, and that is Hope for Earth, a local nonprofit centered on sustainability, the University of Wisconsin River Falls Office of Sustainability, the River Falls Library Foundation, and our very own River Falls Public Library. Our next speaker, coming up next month, the next slide will be author Ashley Shelby. She is going to be speaking on honeymoons in temporary locations. It's cli-fi, which is a new genre of writing for me, which is climate fiction. And that's up on January 30th from 6:30 to 7. And I'm very excited to have her come and share her book with us. So come into the library at first and get to meet her. And in February is our next slide is our very own Mark Klopich from the University of Wisconsin River Falls. And he's going to be presenting on shaping our future, climate action and resiliency discussion. And in this presentation, we'll be working through what the climate action plan is and how they are developed and the aspects that go into them. You don't need to be an expert in this field. We all have something at stake, and we all have something to contribute. So we encourage you to come and join us for this one on February 6th at the public library, and that one's going to be interesting. And then coming after him is going to be our James Beard award-winning chef, Alan Burgo. That's coming up momentarily. Now, I'm going to show you his book. And Alan Burgo is, that's not coming in very well. He's a forager chef, and he's, you want to see a fantastic chef that can create some fantastic dishes out of the plants that and fungus that is in our backyard. This is a guy to see. He is amazing. He's going to do some great stuff that you will find this stuff, right? Or the stuff, plants, weeds sometimes in our own backyard. So come and see Alan Burgo, and he will also be at EarthFest, and he'll be doing a live demonstration of cooking on stage. So that's what's coming up. Now, with this, let's get to our main presenter tonight, Dr. Terry Root. And I'm going to read a little bit. Give me a minute or two to read her bio, because it's fascinating what this woman has done in her career and the importance of why she's doing it. So with that, 2023 was the warmest year since global records began in 1850. July 2024 was the hottest month ever recorded, and the 14 months from June 2023 through July 2024 were the hottest ever recorded for each of those months. Additionally, 15 months of global ocean temperatures from April 23 to June 24 were the hottest ever recorded. This is resulting in the fourth recorded mass bleaching of tropical coral reefs, as well as causing sea level rise to rise due to thermal expansion Additionally, the rapid melting of Greenland and Antarctica ice sheets are expected to increase sea levels by many meters. Indeed, millions of people are being affected by numerous extreme heat waves, extreme droughts, extreme floods, extensive wildfires, longer, hotter summers. Unless we soon slow down the rapid warming, millions of people affected will become billions of people affected. Uh, uh, so, billions of people suffering due to escalating climate disruption. Countless numbers of animals and plants around the globe are being greatly affected by our rapid changing climate, with many facing extinction. The current extinction rate indicates that the sixth mass extinction is not only begun, but it's escalating. Thankfully, humans have caused a problem, so we know how to stop it. We must stop our fossil fuel addiction to reduce the rapid warming of the globe. Each of us can do many things collectively and individually to decrease the emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases. Dr. Terry Root is a professor emerita at Stanford University. She was a lead author of the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change Fourth Assessment Report that in 2007 was co-awarded the Nobel Peace Prize with Vice President Al Gore. Also, the lead author in the third assessment report in 2001 and a review editor for the fifth assessment in 2014. In addition to other honors, Root was awarded the Spirit of Defenders Award for Science by Defenders of Wildlife in 2010 and a Lifetime Achievement Award in 2016 for the conservation organization Point Blue. She served on the National Audubon Board of Directors from 2010 to 2019 and currently serves on the boards of Defenders of Wildlife and Birds of the Caribbean, and is on numerous science advisory boards, including the Renewable Energy Wildlife Institute. Dr. Root earned her undergraduate degree in mathematics and statistics from the University of New Mexico, her master's degree in biology from the University of Colorado, and her doctorate degree from the University of Michigan. From Princeton University. She was a professor at the University of Michigan for half her career and then at Stanford University for the other half. And now she frequently gives talks around the U.S. on climate change and plastics and wildlife, and currently lives in Santa Fe. We're thrilled to have Dr. Terry Root join us tonight, and we're honored to have you here. And Terry, welcome back to the stage.
Thank you so much. I really am pleased to be back. There has been so much change in climate change since I gave my last talk that there's very little that's the same as it was back then. And I was surprised when I was updating my slides how much change there had actually been. So now let's stop looking at this poor, horrible, skinny polar bear, and let's talk about what I want to talk to you about tonight. So today what I want to do is I want to talk to you about climate change since the 1900s. And I picked since the 1900s because before that, humans hadn't affected the climate. So that was pre-industrial time. But then the Industrial Revolution hit, and then we started getting climate change changed by humans. Then I want to go on and talk about future climate change. And then since I'm a biologist, I really worry about other species. So I'm going to talk about that. And then at the end, we're going to talk about what all of us can, and it really isn't a can, it's all of us must do. Now, all of the bird pictures, I'm a bird nerd, so I have bird pictures on all of my my text slides. But all of those are species that occur in Wisconsin. And if we get up to above 2 degrees Celsius, all of these species that are in my text slide, the bird slides, will be moving out of Wisconsin. They will no longer be in Wisconsin. So the red-headed woodpecker, which occurs there now, is a breeding species in Wisconsin. If we get up to 2 degrees above Celsius, will not be there anymore. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about climate change since 1900. So this shows you by decades how the globe has actually warmed. And you can see it starts in 1890s and goes all the way up to 2010. And you can see how it has been increasing and increasing and increasing. And those are the actual data. And you can see what a change there has been. But now 2024 was really quite warm. And this is now showing you land and ocean temperatures in July. And all of the really dark red places are where they actually have recorded records. The records were broken in those red areas. And that's a lot of area to actually have records being broken in July of 2024. So each summer we've been getting warmer and warmer and warmer, and that's really what's going to continue happening too. Now let's talk a little bit about what's happened since 1880. So I'm going to show you a temperature plot, and I want to explain it to you before I show you the plot. What it is average monthly global surface temperature anomalies. And I have the anomalies from 1880 to 2024. And these are relative to the average from 1951 to 1980. And unfortunately, I wanted it to be for pre-industrial average, the anomalies for pre-industrial, but they didn't have that. They only had it when it was relative to 1951 to 1980 average. So here we go, and you can see it's going 1940s, 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s. Look how much warmer it's gotten. Now look at that. You can see how it has actually gone up. And I'll show it to you again. It's going up and up and up. And now you can see it the normal way. So temperature really has warmed. And this is now showing you global temperature anomalies, the same type of anomalies. But this is from 1850 to 2024. And again, it's in degrees C. And it's relative to pre-industrial. So this is what the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change is looking at, is how the temperature has warmed compared to pre-industrial. And you can see that it has really increased significantly. And in 2024, the temperature was 1.48 degrees C above pre-industrial. And when you look at, I'm sorry, that was for 2023 because we don't have all the 2024. 2024 is 1.54 degrees C, and that's the average from just January to September. So it has gotten a lot warmer, quite a bit faster in the end. Now, what's happened over time? This shows you what the temperature was, the change in global temperature, again in degrees C, and it goes all the way back to 24,000 years before 1950. And I don't know why they picked 1950, but they did. Anyway, you can see how it really was so much cooler in 2024. In 6,000 years ago, before 6,000 years before 1950, basically same as 6,000 years ago, you can see that the globe was cooler in the up in Canada, but it really hadn't changed from 16,000 years before 1950. It really had been pretty stable, but now 12,000 years ago, you can see it was much, much cooler. You can see the ice forming in Canada and the Arctic. And if you go back to 24,000 years ago, look at how much ice there was. So temperature really makes a difference on how it is affected affecting the Earth. And now let me show you what it looked like in 2023. That's what it was. So there's a huge difference over the millennium of how things have changed and the temperature of the planet. And that just shows you that in 2023, the global average temperature was 1.48 degrees C above pre-industrial. So it's really, really getting warmer. Now, I couldn't find anything for River Falls, but for Minneapolis and St. Paul, which is close to you guys, this is what we find in the fall. We find that the first free days of the year are getting later and later and later each year. So from 1970, when the first Earth Day was, you can see that it is getting much, much later, and it's 22 days later in 2023. That's a big, huge change. Now, if you look at the lowest temperatures for each year, again in Minneapolis and St. Paul, you can see that the lowest temperatures of the year are getting a lot warmer. So again, from 1970, when the first Earth Day was, to 2023, it increased by basically 12 degrees. That's a huge, huge difference. Now, also, the temperature is not just warming on the surface of the planet, it's also warming in the oceans. And in 2023, we had a huge, big warming trend, and it continued into 2024. And now we are having coral bleaching, and it is really tough what's going on in the oceans, because we are getting so warm. And plus that, when you have so much CO2 in the atmosphere, that CO2 is rubbing on the water, and what's happening is it's making carbonic acid, and it's also making the oceans a lot more acidic. So not only are the oceans getting warmer, but they're also getting a lot more acidic. So the poor species that are living in the ocean they're really having a hard time of it. But you can see how it is getting warmer and warmer and warmer. And then in 2023, it was extremely warm, and it continued into 2024. Now, what really is causing that warming of the temperatures is the concentrations of greenhouse gases. And those are primarily CO2, which is measured, that's the red line. It's measured in parts per million. Also, methane, which is CH4, and that's measured in parts per billion. That's the green line. And then you have nitrous oxides, which is N2O, and that's measured in parts per billion, and that's the blue curve. And you can see how incredibly how much of an increase there has been in the latest time. The x-axis goes from 0 all the way back to 800,000 years ago. So if you look at the CO2 curve never really went above 300 parts per million. There's a lot of cycling, and those are called the Milankovitch cycles. And that's what the naysayers for climate change say. Well, the climate is always changing. It cycles. Yes, it does cycle. But look at what's happened recently. It has spiked all the way up. And I just looked at the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere on Monday, and it was 421 parts per million. That's a lot different than 300, which it had been cycling along until the Industrial Revolution. The same thing goes for methane. Methane had never really gotten above 800 parts per billion, but then when the Industrial Revolution hit, it started spiking. And the same thing now is true for nitrous oxide. So those greenhouse gases plus other gases are causing this warming. And the thing is that humans are causing this, which is a really good thing, because since we're causing it, we now know how to stop it. So now let's talk about future climate change. Now, the brown thrasher is one of those birds that occurs in Wisconsin. And if we get up to 3 degrees Celsius above industrial revolution or above the pre-industrial times, then that brown thrasher will no longer be breeding in Wisconsin. So let's talk about future climate change. This is an old slide, but I think it's a very important one. It hasn't changed that much. These are projections by scientists on the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change. They didn't know what was going to go on in the future. On the x-axis, we have years, and on the y-axis, we have parts per million of CO2 equivalents. That means CO2, methane, nitrous oxides, and other greenhouse gas concentrations. The black line is showing you what is business as usual. If we don't do anything, that's what's going to happen. And the green and blue lines are showing what's going to happen if we have an egalitarian society and have different changes going on. Will bring the CO2 concentrations down and other greenhouse gases down. And that's what we want. That's what we want to be following. We want to be following the green line. We'll talk about that in a minute. The red line is the reason that I show this slide. The red line is this slide was done in 2016, and the scientists said that what happens is all of a sudden in 2016, all greenhouse gas emissions stop going up into the atmosphere. They stop immediately. Now, if they stop immediately, you would assume that the concentrations would drop over time. Well, they drop a little bit, but they don't drop a whole lot. And the reason for that is because CO2 stays in the atmosphere for 1,000 years. And when it stays in the atmosphere for 1,000 years, that means the CO2 that we put in the atmosphere right now, today, will be there for 40 generations from now. That's how long it takes to get that CO2 out of the atmosphere. And really, the only way we know to get it out of the atmosphere is by using trees and plants and things like that. So the point of this is that what we do today is very important because it influences what's going to go on for the next 40 generations. That also tells you that what's going on right now has been put into the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution started. And that was basically all due to the US putting CO2 in the atmosphere. So what's happening today is really the fault of Americans. That's a tough one to swallow, but it's true. Okay, this is a slide again that is showing you global temperature change anomalies, and this is relative to pre-industrial, but this is not actual temperature. This is modeled temperature, and it works until about 2016, and then it's now projections, and it's projecting out that by 2100, if we stay on the black curve that I just showed you, the business as usual curve, that we will actually go all the way out to 5 degrees C above pre-industrial. That is a lot of temperature change, and that's going to cause a lot of suffering, not just of people, but also of other species. Now, What will the Earth look like? Okay, we all know about the Paris Accords that went in. I think it was in 2014. I'm not sure about that date, but anyway, the Paris Accords went in. Before the Paris Accords went in, we assumed that we were going to go up by 4 degrees Celsius. If the world goes up to 4 degrees Celsius, which is the same as going up 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial, that's what our world will look like. Right now, our current pathway is to go to about 3 degrees Celsius pre-industrial, which is 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial. What we want to do is the pledges that were made during the Paris Accord is we're not going to go above 2 degrees. So 2 degrees, that is what our world will look like. And it is, so it's 2 degrees C or 3.6 degrees, or what we actually truly want, and we can talk about the difference between these, is 1.5 degrees C. We don't want to go above 1.5 degrees C, because if we do, then the frozen methane in the ocean is going to melt and go up into the atmosphere, and that could end up being a disaster. So what we really want our world to look like is 1.5 degrees C by 2100, not 4 degrees C by 2100. Now, this is now showing you by color the different temperatures that we have had since 1900. And again, it is in anomalies, so it's above the it's above the pre-industrial levels. And you can see that back in the 1900s, it was cool, and then going all the way up to 2020, it has been warming. And my husband was born in 1950, and when he was 70 in 2020, he actually had experienced probably about 1 degree Celsius increase during his lifetime up until that time. Now, my stepdaughter was born in 1980, and she will be 70 by 2050, and she will be experiencing probably up to 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial. And then I have a grandnephew that was born in 2020, and hopefully by the time he's 70 in 2090, he will only experience maybe 2 degrees. But if we don't get working and trying to get ourselves off our fossil fuel addiction, he could go up. It could go up as far as 4 degrees C and maybe even higher than that. And we don't want that to happen. Now, if indeed we stayed on the business as usual, the temperature of roughly where River Falls is, around Minneapolis, St. Paul, in 2020, it will be by 2060, the temperature there will be equivalent to what it is now in Omaha. And by 2100, it will be equivalent to what it is now in Tulsa, Oklahoma. That meaning that it is going to be 10.5 degrees Fahrenheit higher in the summertime than it is right now by 2100. That's a big shift. That's going to be very, very, very warm. Now, as we warm the planet, we are also melting ice. And about 2.5 years ago, we passed the point, a tipping point. And so now, basically, no matter what happens, Greenland, all of Greenland is going to melt. And the amount of ice that is in Greenland is about 23 feet of global sea level rise. Now, it's estimated between 23 and 28 feet. I chose to think positively and look at 23 feet above of how much ice is in Greenland. So it's 23 feet of global sea level rise. And what's that going to mean? There's the state where I used to live in Florida. Florida is not going to look much like Florida. So if you live in Miami or if you live in Fort Myers, I used to live in Sarasota, but I was inland from Sarasota, and I used to look at this and I thought, oh, everything will be fine. Not really, because the hospitals and the post offices and the grocery stores and all of that are down by the coast. So it's going to be a tough time when we get 23 feet of sea level rise. And if you live in the Bahamas, you're not going to have any place to be. That's not good. Okay, so what we need is big changes. We want to limit our global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial, or 2.7 degrees Fahrenheit above pre-industrial. Now, in 2010, we were a little bit below 40 gigatons of CO2 emitted per year. 2017, we were going the wrong way. And now what we need is by 2030, we want to be at 45% of what it was in 2010. So how are we doing? Not well. In 2023, we emitted 37 gigatons of CO2 in that 1 year. So we were down from 2017, which is good, but we have a long way to go to get down to 45% of 2010 by 2030. That's going to be a tough thing. And then by 2050, we want to be at net zero. Now that's going to be tough, because even if we do get off of our fossil fuel addiction, we are not going to get off of our plastic addiction. And plastics come from fossil fuels. And for every 1 pound of plastics, we put 6 pounds of CO2 in the atmosphere. So we've got to somehow get below zero to compensate for that. And that's going to be a tough thing to do. And now we have President Trump coming in, who is saying that climate change is a hoax. And I am really concerned about what's going to happen. We're going to lose all of the gains that we have made, which we haven't made many, but we've made some. Okay, so we've talked about future climate change. Now let's talk about other species, because other species are being affected. They live on the planet with us. They cannot go into their air-conditioned homes, so it's tough. So this is a slide that I showed last time that I gave a talk, but it's a slide that shows how species interdepend on each other. Here's a polar bear in the Arctic when there used to be a lot of ice there, and the polar bears would go out on the ice and they would be able to hunt seals, and they would get the seals and they would kill them, and then they would literally fling blood and guts everywhere. And then you have this small little bird, I hope you can see, that's right in front of the polar bear. It's called an ivory gull. And the ivory gull makes its living by eating all of this blood and guts that are spread around by the polar bear. Well, since the ice has gone away, the polar bears aren't going out on the ice, aren't going out on the ice and killing seals. It's good for seals, not good for the polar bears. That's why we had such a skinny polar bear on the title slide that I showed you. The polar bears are suffering, and the ivory gulls are suffering horribly. Their abundances are plummeting, and the ivory gull, I am sure, will go extinct before I die, which is pretty sad because it's going extinct on my watch. That's tough. Now, the warming of the world is causing changes in species, and the changes in the species They are primarily in two different kinds. The first one is in phenology. They're changing in the timing of things. Phenology means timing. So things are doing, species are doing things earlier in the spring, later in the fall. The other change that is happening is they're changing in ranges. So in the northern hemisphere, they're going towards the North Pole, and they're also going up towards mountaintops. And the species in the oceans are going deeper into the deeper water where it's cooler. So species are changing in areas where it's cooler. And so phenology, I think all of us realize that things are changing in the spring. Our daffodils are coming up earlier. Our hyacinths are coming up earlier. The cherry blossoms in Japan and in Washington, D.C. are blooming at a different time period. There really is a huge change. They're changing earlier, and there's a huge change. Birds are breeding earlier too. So there's a lot of changes happening. Now, when you're talking about changing in ranges, here's one that we all know, the USDA plant hardiness zone maps. Well, in 1990, you could see that there was a very different zoning than there is now in 2024. Look at Wisconsin. Wisconsin used to have zone 3, zone 4, and zone 5. It still has zone 3, but only in one little tiny spot, but it's primarily zone 4 and zone 5. Things have changed just from 1990 to now. The hardinesses of plants have changed. Species are going up on the mountaintops. The ones that used to occur on the tops of mountains now don't have any place to go. They're becoming extinct. It's really a lot of changes going on. And we have to remember that climate change is not happening just alone. There are other changes, like having a lot of humans on the planet. And when we have a lot of humans, we have to have a lot of homes. And those homes are causing habitat destruction. And we have to eat. And those farms are causing habitat destruction. So we have both climate change and habitat destruction going on at the exact same times. So there are, in the 1990s, there were 2 butterflies that occurred in Baja California. And as it was getting warmer, they were moving north, and everything was fine. They were moving north up the Baja California until they hit Tijuana and San Diego. And think of yourself as being a butterfly trying to fly over this area that has no native plants at all for them to eat. How are they going to make it? They're not going to make it. Both species went extinct. So the other thing that all of us can do is plant native plants. So I'd like you to make me a pact today. Whenever you plant a plant that you're not going to eat, that it's going to be a native plant, so you can be helping the species that really need those plants. So with all of this climate change and habitat destruction, a study was done to look at what's happened to birds. And what they found that was since 1970, from 1970 to 2010, we lost almost 3 billion species, 3 billion, not species, 3 billion individual birds. So in 1970, there were about 12 billion breeding birds in North America, and we lost 3 billion. That's equivalent to losing 1 out of every 4 birds that existed in 1970. So we only have 3/4 of the number of birds here in North America as we did back in 1970. That's a very, very sad, sad statement. Audubon did a study and looked at survival by degrees. They wanted to know what was going to happen to North American birds if we go up 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial, 2 degrees C, or 3 degrees C. And what they found is if indeed we go up 3 degrees C, which I hope we don't, but we may, that 389 North American species of birds will be on the brink of extinction. That's a lot of birds. That is 2/3 of all North American birds will be on the brink of extinction if we go up by 3 degrees C. So what about this in Wisconsin? So I looked at the Audubon, and you all can go on Audubon and look for survival by degrees, and you can put in your zip code or your state. I put in the state of Wisconsin, and the breeding birds that are highly or moderately vulnerable in Wisconsin, if we increase by 1.5 degrees C above pre-industrial, there's 5 that are highly vulnerable, risk of extinction. Moderately vulnerable are 56. If we go up by 2 degrees C, then 11 breeding birds in Wisconsin are going to be highly vulnerable, and 72 species are going to be moderately vulnerable. And if we go up 3 degrees, oh, I hope we don't, but if we go up 3 degrees C above pre-industrial, 44 species of breeding birds in Wisconsin are going to be at risk of extinction, and 63 are going to be moderately vulnerable to extinction. Now, extinction is a natural thing. Background extinction rate is less than 1 species going extinct out of 1,000 species over 1,000 years. Now, let me explain that. If you have one big, huge island and you have 1,000 species living on that island, and you watch that island for 1,000 years, less than one species will go extinct. That's what that means. Now let's look at the current extinction rate. The current extinction rate is about 1 species in 10 species, not 1,000 species, over about 80 years, not 1,000 years. That is quite a shift. So things are going extinct. We are already in the 6th mass extinction event, and it is happening on our watch. So in 2007, I was on the IPCC 4th assessment report, and we looked at all of the evidence, and we said that when we go up 2 degrees C above pre-industrial, that we will have about 500,000 extinctions of species, 500,000. Now, there are about 2 million species that have names that exist on the planet. There's probably 10 million species, but only 2 million of them have names. So we're going to focus on that 2 million. So what that means is when we go up 2 degrees C above pre-industrial, we will lose 1/4 of the world's species. That's what we said in 2007. We were wrong. The new studies are showing that we will have about 1 million species go extinct when we get up to 2 degrees C. So half the world's species will go extinct when we hit 2 degrees C above pre-industrial. Holy moly, that's horrible. And the thing is we're going to need some of those species to stay alive. So now we've talked about all of these horrible things. Now let's talk about what we can do to make it better, what we can all do and must do, and we can make it better. Now, progress since Paris. We have not made enough progress since Paris. This red line that goes across is showing you at the top is 2 degrees, at the bottom is 1.5 degrees. The Paris Accord wants us to stay at 1.5, but realizes that we'll probably go up to 2. So that's what that red line is. That's the Paris Agreement. Before we had the Paris Agreement, we were going to go up above 4 degrees C by 2100 above pre-industrial. Our current policies have us going up above 3 degrees C. It's not enough. We have to have a change. Can we change? Of course we can change. All we have to do is do it. The first thing we have to do is have a paradigm shift. And we've had paradigm shifts all the time. Let me show you an example. Here's an example of a paradigm shift. Blow in her face and she'll follow you anywhere. This shows 2 paradigm shifts, I think. One is how having public smoking is considered absolutely rude. And that is a huge paradigm shift from the 1950s. The other paradigm shift that I see here is blow in her face. If somebody blew smoke in my face today, there's no way in the world I would follow them anywhere. That's a crazy statement. So we have a woman's lib issue going on here. We've had paradigm shifts before. We can have paradigm shifts again. And I really think that we are starting those paradigm shifts, and it's starting with the younger people. And us old fogies just have to get out of their way or support them and say, this is what we need. The other thing is that we have to realize that doing something to stop climate change is good for our economy. This is showing you on the x-axis is years, on the y-axis is annual number of events that were over in the US that were over billion-dollar disasters. So in 2023, we had over 25 of these disasters that were over $1 billion disasters. If we stop climate change, we're going to save that money. It makes a lot of sense. Now, President Biden passed a thing called the Inflation Reduction Act, which is a horrible name, but what it's doing is talking about how much emissions we can cut by 2030. And this is what he said we could do. We could cut 6% in the non-CO2 greenhouse gases. That's in methane and the like. We can do that. That's what he said. And I believe seriously we can do that. We can cut 37% out of our power, our electric power, and we can do that. And we have done that with wind and solar. We can cut 29%. I actually think we could do higher than that. But anyway, he's said we could cut 29% in transportation by having electric cars and plug-in cars. 13% in industry. Cutting industry is tough. I don't know how he wanted to do the 13%. I'm sorry, I haven't looked it up, but 13% is, I think, is a lot. I'm not sure we can make that. 9% in land carbon sinks, we can do that. And 6% in buildings. We know how to make zero emission buildings. We just have to have the developers do it. Does it cost more money? Yes. Does it save us money in the long run? Yes. We know how to do it. We can do it. So the Inflation Reduction Act, the Inflation Reduction Act says that by 2030, we can drop by 980 million metric tons of greenhouse gases. Can we do it? We can if we just do it. That's the thing. And now with Trump coming in, I'm not sure. The Inflation Reduction Act also said that we were going to reduce the petroleum products. This is 1 million barrels per year. We were going to reduce significantly. Now, with Trump coming in, I don't think we're going to be able to do this, which is a very, very sad statement. Here is where President Trump in 2018 opened up new oil and gas drilling areas that were off the coast. Now, for comparison, Obama had about a quarter of what there was just in the Gulf Coast. No place else did he allow new oil and gas drilling. So basically, Trump is opening all of the areas along the coastlines of America. Not good. That's what he did in 2018. And when he's coming in, he's saying, now we're going to drill, baby, drill. So he's going to open all of this offshore and onshore too. Now, the other thing that the IRA is saying is this is how many gigawatts per year that we could be adding. We could be adding solar. We could be adding offshore solar. We could be adding solar. We could be adding offshore wind, onshore wind. Nuclear is not going to change. Gas with carbon capture is increasing a little bit, but not much. Gas is increasing some, and coal with carbon capture is increasing a bit. So these are the ways that we think we can actually change the gigawatts per hour to put fewer emissions into the atmosphere. Now, excuse me. Heavens, excuse me. Hold on a minute. I got to take a drink. Okay. Now, the Inflation Reduction Act is providing more employment by resources. This is thousands of jobs. So each of these is showing you, say in 2030, if you look at the bar for 2030, the net increase of employment is going to be 1.7 million jobs. So we're going to have CO2 transportation and storage is the purple. The red is changing the grid. We've got to have more grid available. And that's going to take some manufacturing. We have solar manufacturing, solar other, that's making sure that the solar is working, wind manufacturing, wind other. And then we have natural gas, oil, and coal. Those are all negative. So the black line is actually showing you what the net employment is going to be. And by 2035, they're talking about 2.3 million jobs net. That's a lot of jobs coming from the IRA. Okay, so now what about solar generation? In 2023, this is what it looked like. And in Wisconsin alone, there was almost 150,000 homes powered by solar, and that was up by almost 50% from 2022. Woohoo! See, we can do these things. Here's wind capacity going from 2020 to 2050. We can have a lot more wind. Now, I said I was a bird nerd. Everybody says, and Trump says, that the turbines are causing the death of birds. That actually is not true. Small birds, the number of small birds that one wind turbine kills over an entire year is about 3.2 to 3.7 small birds per year. So if you look at it, what actually is killing the birds? It's people who have cats and let them outside. 2.4 billion birds per year are killed by cats. That's domestic and feral cats. And turbines are 4 orders of magnitude less. Turbines are not a problem with killing birds. If you're worried about killing birds, we need to take on the cat problem. Now, this is a plot that I think is one of the most significant plots and hopeful plots, because what it shows is on the x-axis is location, and on the y-axis is tons of CO2 emitted per capita in 2021. The data are not out for 2023 or 2024 yet. So these are older data. But it shows that New York, Massachusetts, California, They know what to do to not have a lot of emissions. Arizona, the average for the US, and Wisconsin are a little bit higher, and they could do better. They could do as well as New York, Massachusetts, and California, but they're doing pretty well. But then we go to these three crazy states: Alaska, North Dakota, and Wyoming. Look at how much CO2 emissions per capita they're doing. This is showing us that we know what to do. We just have to have the political will to do it. And think about which are the blue states and the red states. Yep, the blue states seem to know what's going on. I used to live in California, and I used to say, we've never met a regulation that we don't like. Yes, it is going to take regulation, but it's going to save the world. So we do know what to do. Now, where do the greenhouse gas sources come from? 25% is coming from the generation of electricity. 28.5% is coming from transportation, 10% from agriculture, 13% from commercial and residential, and 23.5% from industry. Now, let's talk about what we can do, what we all need to do. For electricity to really change electricity, we all need to be supporting solar rooftops and farms. We need to be supporting wind farms. We need to be only buying Energy Star appliances. All of us are going to have appliances that are going to wear out, and we're going to have to replace them. Replace them with Energy Star, highly rated Energy Star appliances, and go electric. So when you need to replace your hot water heater, replace it with an electric, high Energy Star water heater. And the same goes for dryers. You can do the same thing. You need to unplug or turn off those appliances. I have hearing aids, and my hearing aids have a charger. And when I put the hearing aids in, they charge. When I take the hearing aids out, the charger sits there and it's on, and it's saying, I'm ready to charge your hearing aids. Well, I'm not going to charge them. I'm going to wear them. So why doesn't it just turn itself off? It doesn't. I have to physically unplug it. And we all can do that. We all have toasters that sit there and say, I'm ready to toast your toast. At 3 o'clock in the morning when you're sound asleep, I'm ready to toast your toast. We need to turn those appliances off. We can unplug them or get little switches that will turn them off. The other thing I am just horrified by is how many people still have incandescent light bulbs. If you have an incandescent light bulb, including Christmas tree bulbs, throw them in the landfill. We need to stop using incandescent bulbs. We all can do that, and it really just means you just have to do it. Transportation. I want you to make a pact with me today. The next car that you buy is going to be an electric vehicle, or at least a plug-in hybrid that gets about 40 miles to the plug-in. And that means that you basically are not going to be using fossil fuels except in rare occasions. And you can do that. We can do that. My husband and I have an electric vehicle. We have a Leaf. We absolutely love it. And we have a plug-in hybrid. We have a RAV4 Prime. So we plug it in and we get 42 miles to the charge. And basically, we just don't ever use gasoline anymore unless we go on long trips. Okay, what about agriculture? All of us can do this. We all need to eat less red meat and less dairy, because the cows are and sheep and such are putting methane into the atmosphere. So all of us can do this. We can eat less red meat and less dairy. This goes for your pets also. They need to not be eating beef also. And can you do it? You can do it. Can it make you healthier? It will make you healthier. You just have to do it. Commercial and residential. We all can do this because we know how to make zero emission buildings. We know how to retrofit old ones and how to make new ones. So we all can do that, and we just need to do it. Industry is tougher. How do you actually change how cement is made? That's a tough thing. How do we change how steel is made? That's tough. So what I say is we need to plant trees. All of us can do this. There are a lot of organizations that plant trees. We have to be careful about what kind of trees they're planting and where they're planting them. I've done a lot of research, and I have decided that cooleffect.org is a really good organization. It's coming up to be Christmas time, and there's always people that you don't know what to buy for Christmas. Well, my brother is one of those that has everything. What am I going to get him? What I do is I offset his carbon emissions for 6 months. So I go on cooleffect.org. They help me figure out how much it is. I pay them. They plant the trees. And my brother now has been no longer has the carbon emissions debt that he would have. So it's a good thing to do. Can we all do it? Absolutely. We all can do it. There are other organizations. Just be careful which ones you pick, because some of them plant the wrong non-native trees, or they plant them all of the same age group, and you don't want that. So Cool Effect is a good one. The other place that we're getting greenhouse gases is methane emissions. And the methane emissions in the US is 39% is coming from energy. That's primarily from the methane that's coming from the oil wells. 6% is other. 19% is from our landfills primarily. And then 36% is from agriculture. So what can we do about that? We all need to do this. Stop our fossil fuel addiction to decrease the energy that we were, the drill baby drill. We don't need to have that much oil being drilled. Can we do that? We can. We can do that. I've just shown you in the other slide what to do. Other, I don't know about that. Waste. From now on, you don't want to ever put anything that is compostable into your garbage. You either have an outdoor composting ability, either your own or a community one. If you don't have that, then do what I do. I have a tabletop composting bin, and what it does, it's made by Vitamix, and it's called a food cycler. That's what it's called, food cycler. And what you do is you put all of your compostable stuff in there. It heats it up, grinds it up, and then I put it into a trash can that I then in the springtime I put on all of my flower beds, and my flowers absolutely love it. So all of us can do that too. There are lots of different types of tabletop composting, but there's no excuse. We all can do that. So make a pact with me today that that's what you're going to do. Agriculture. This goes back to beef again. So again, eating less red meat and less dairy is super, super, super important. And we can do it. I used to say we can have a meatless Monday. No, what we need to do is probably 4 to 5 days a week, eat no meat and no dairy. On the other 2 days, you can. But anyway, we all can do this. The other thing that we all have to do is we have to vote, because your vote is your voice, and it hugely, hugely matters, particularly in 2 years from now. So I'm sure a lot of you have seen this picture. It was done in 1968, and it is showing you Earthrise over the moon. And look how tiny our planet is, our beautiful, beautiful blue planet. And we are causing a lot of trauma to that planet. All of the species, humans included, and all the other species are really suffering. And we all know what we can do to try and stop it. and we have got to stop it because we don't have a second planet. That's our planet. We need to take care of this fragile planet, and we all can. So I wanted to thank you all for listening to me tonight. Thank you.
Terry, thank you so much. That was so informational, and hearing climate change reality is tough.
Yeah.
But we can't put our head in the sand.
No.
It's just the inheritance that we will leave the next generations would be tragic.
Right. Exactly.
So I've got a question for you. With AI, it's it's out there, and for people like my generation, it's new, and we're used to writing on our own. But it's also very convenient, and now it's the first thing that pops up when you do a Google search. Can you tell us? Can you share any of the impacts that we are seeing on the environment from AI?
It's huge, and I don't know what to do about it. AI is very convenient. Um, I'm on these different boards, and a lot of the board members, they'll tell me how they need to read a 17-page thing in the next 5 minutes and give their boss a summary. And so what do? They ask AI, and it happens like that, and they've got these bullet points, and it's wonderful. I agree, it's wonderful. The trouble is how much energy AI is taking, and it is just astronomical. And I just saw that there is a woman, I think she is in Tennessee, who is going to try and figure out how much energy it is taking for the different kind of AI programs, and make them and rate them and say, this one doesn't use as much energy as that one does, so that's the one you want to be using. But it does take a lot of energy, and I just don't. The other thing that does too is Bitcoin. And so Bitcoin and whatever else they're called uses an immense amount of energy, and it's just horrible. What we need to do is we've got to have renewable energy taking over, and if the renewable energy can provide that energy, then that's wonderful. But if it can't provide that energy, the amount of CO2 from our burning fossil fuels is going to be immense, and we can't have that. We just can't have that continue. So we've got to somehow start using renewable energy for AI and for Bitcoin and for everything else. We've got to. We don't have a choice. Otherwise, the world we're going to be leaving our children and our children's children it's just going to be horrible. Just horrible. The suffering is going to be immense.
Here in River Falls and a lot of other communities, we're fortunate to have a very deep reservoir of committed young people, and we've got a very good university here. So this question comes from one of those students, Vinny. Says, over the years of studying, researching, and teaching this, how have you and your colleagues not fallen into climate doomism?
Actually, I was in a board meeting today with the Renewable Energy and Wildlife Institute, and we were talking about what has actually gone on. I have been working on climate change literally since 1985. And I basically said, I have failed because we right now are on the trajectory to be above 3 degrees C above pre-industrial by 2100. And if I had succeeded, we would have been 1.5 degrees C, not above 3. So I said, I have failed. Well, I haven't failed in the sense that I have gotten the science right. But what we have failed to do is to get a paradigm shift that gets people to understand how important it is that we have to really do something about that. There's a new film out that is called The White House Effect, the White House in Washington, D.C., the White House Effect, and it traces what actually went wrong and why the paradigm shift didn't kick in the way it should have. It's a very interesting movie. It's right now it's in film festivals, so it's not out to see locally, but it will be. And if you have the opportunity, please see it. Do I get down? Oh boy, I really do get down. But then I think, but I can drive an electric car. I can do all of these things, and I can make my footprint as small as I can. And I can go around and I can get people to realize that instead of saying, I don't want windmills or turbines or solar fields in my backyard. I don't want them. I can get people to say, I do want them. I do want them because that's going to help save the planet. So going around and giving talks and doing what I can and being on boards that push people to do things the right way, I am making a difference. And do I have hope? Yes, I have hope. Can I save all the species on the planet? No, I can't. But I can save some of them, and I am going to work as hard as I can to save the ones that I can. And I'm going to focus on them and try not to focus on the ones that I'm losing. Do I cry a lot? Yes, I cry a lot. But I pick myself up and I keep going on because I've got to save the ones that I can. That was a long-winded answer. Sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. That's good. It was a passionate answer, and we appreciate that. I think we have time for one more question, and this one is from another one of our local climate champions. Will you please compare and contrast local organic foods, including beef and dairy, to industrial conventional food agriculture?
Oh my heavens. That I could give an entire lecture on for an hour. That's tough. Local is good because you don't have the transportation costs, but even local beef is not good because of the methane that is being produced. So that's a real tough one. The other thing too is you need to be raising beef in a way that's not destroying grassland birds, for instance. Grassland birds have been dropping by more than 50% since 1970. Everything starts in 1970 because that's when the first Earth Day was. The drop has just been astronomical. So beef is just an absolute horrible thing. Now, when you have these industrial farms, the trouble is that they're doing things to raise a buck, and they're not worried about all the damage that they're doing, in my opinion. And you need to be worrying about all the damage that is going on. So trying to buy local, trying to buy from folks that care about the world, care about the earth, care about their piece of property, makes a huge difference. So these huge, large industrial folks that are able to sell things for cheap because they don't care, you need to try to avoid. At least that's my opinion, and I try to avoid them as much as I possibly can. I try to shop at co-ops. I try to research where things are being raised and how they're being raised. And there are good ways and there are bad ways. And and we can we can vote with our pocketbooks, and that's important. Now, can you ask somebody who is just barely scraping by and can barely make rent to do that? No, you can't. So that means that those of us who can afford it must do it to try and counterbalance those people who are just barely squeaking by, because we can't demand that they're going to do the same things that people who can afford it can. And it's amazing how much you can afford when you really want to make a difference in the world.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Terry. Excellent answer. Very, very thoughtful. And we are fortunate here in Wisconsin to have a strong ag industry, whether it's large or small. So we have lots of opportunities to be able to grow our own food and to shop locally. So,
Right.
Well, Terry, I think that's about it for tonight.
Okay.
I want to thank you so much for coming back to River Falls and sharing your wisdom with us. We're very honored to have you here and consider ourselves blessed to have a Nobel laureate that shares her passion and knowledge with us.
Thank you. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was really a great time.
All right. Great. And thank you to everyone who listened tonight and followed along, and hope to see you participating in the next speaker in the Sustainability Speaker Series. And with that, good night, everybody.
Good night.